Hello, it is a new year, which for me means it's a time to make new resolutions. And if you're anything like me, you're making some resolutions that are health and wellness related every year. I make some sort of goal in regards to my health. That may be eating more salads or more vegetables or trying to lose this amount of weight, trying to build this amount of muscle, blah, blah, blah. But this year I am starting my year out with trying to do a cut. I want to lose a little bit of weight, and the way that I'm going to do that is using macros counting. If you are anything like me, the first time I had ever heard macros counting, it sounded like a foreign language. And so last year I went on a wellness journey and became a personal trainer. Woohoo! So much work. And now I'm working on my nutrition certification as well. And while I was going on this journey, I also hired a macros coach from Macros Inc., which I would highly recommend. But through that journey, I've learned a lot about how to calculate my own macros and how macros works. And so I wanted to give you a very basic version of how to calculate and set yourself up for starting with macros. So what are macros, you may be asking? Well, macros are your macronutrients, the biggest nutrients we consume to provide our body with energy. We're putting energy in so we can put energy out. And all of those nutrients work in different ways to help our body function. Without going into depth on what those nutrients are good for, we want to talk about what those nutrients are. And the three macronutrients that we focus on are carbs, protein, and fats. And then there's alcohol. That's it's not a nutrient, it's off to the side, but that's something that we also should consider calculating as well when we're working with macros. So we then need to understand that each one of these macronutrients provide different forms of energy, and they have different values of energy. So we'll start with protein. 1 gram of protein is equal to 4 calories. And so I know most of us know what calories are, and when you're counting your macros, you're also needing to consider your full calorie consumption, and we'll get into that in a second. But 1 gram of protein is equal to 4 kcals. 1 gram of carbohydrates is equal to 4 kcals. And then fats are equal to 9 calories. 1 gram of fat is equal to 9 calories. So they're a little bit more carb or calorie heavy. And then the alcohols, 1 gram of alcohol is equal to 7 calories. I'm not going to go into depth on alcohol right now, but it is important that you count your alcohol consumption. Pay close attention to the nutrients on the bottle, so you make sure you consider that when you're working out your macros. So those that like to count macros, don't consider it a diet because you aren't restricting any sort of food. Like keto restricts carbs, and you're not cutting anything out of your diet. You're just learning how to fit everything into your diet and starting to realize what nourishes you better than what other things nourish you better. And you'll start to see while counting macros that those whole foods or those less processed foods are going to be more filling, and you'll see why it's so important that we try to eat less processed food along the way. But without getting into all of that, you can still consume processed foods in a macros diet plan. So we're going to start by just calculating our BMR. Now, here's the thing. A lot of people have a lot of debates on BMR accuracy because body shapes are different and all of that. So this is just a close estimate to what our basal metabolic rate is. When we calculate it this way, I would suggest, and I will link a scale down below, but you get a scale that kind of measures things more electric with electric pulses, and I don't know all of the science behind it, but I would suggest you try to do that for a little bit more accurate BMR, but I'm going to show you here how you can calculate your BMR. That's the first thing that we need to do to figure out what kind of macros we should be consuming. So I am here on omnicalculator.com. I'm looking at their BMR calculator, the Mifflin St. Jour version, and I am going to put here my sex is female, my age is 41 years old, my height, I am 5 foot 6 inches, and my weight is currently 129 pounds. And then it's going to give me my BMR, and right here it says my BMR is 1,267 calories. So with that BMR, that is basically how many calories my body burns just doing life. So if I were to just kind of sit here and chill out, and just like kind of like move without any exercise and all of that stuff, that is what my basal metabolic rate is. And that's important to know, because if you were to just like literally sit and chill out, that's how many calories you can consume without gaining weight. Again, this is just an estimate, but it's a close estimate. I'm then going to take my basal metabolic rate, the 1,267 calories, and I'm going to multiply it by my activity level. So 1.2 if you're sedentary, if you have a job where you sit, I would focus it on what kind of job that you have, and then 1.8 if your job is like being a lumberjack. So you kind of want to base it off of that. I'm a teacher, I'm on my feet, I dance for my singing gigs, I like to work out, so I would consider myself somewhat active, but it's definitely not lumberjack level. So I'm going to give myself, let's say I'm going to give myself like a 1.4. So I'm going to multiply this by 1.4. And that is going to give me a estimate on what my maintenance calories would be. So if I ate 1,773.8 calories a day, I would probably maintain the same weight every single day. And probably, I mean, your weight's going to fluctuate. Your weight in pounds on the scale is going to fluctuate based off of water weight and things like that, but my actual fat loss is not going to change much if I stay around 1,700 calories. So then I want to subtract from that because I want to have weight loss, and I would not suggest subtracting any more than 5% of your actual body weight. And I'm going to try to do sort of a heavy cut to start off with. So I'm going to subtract starting off with 5%. So minus 5%, which is going to equal 1,685 calories a day. We're gonna then start by calculating our fats. Fats have been given a bad rap for a really long time, and fats are really important for a lot of nutrient absorption, especially fat soluble vitamins. So, you know, it's also really good for hormone regulation, things like that. So we really have to be really careful about eliminating fats completely from our diet. So the very first thing we want to tell ourselves is we now need to have 30%, 25 to 35% of our diet needs to be fats. And I'm going to go right in the middle there and work at 30%. Okay, so now that I'm going right in the middle, I'm going to multiply 30% into my total calories allowed. And it's saying 505 of my calories can be fats. Now, the way that you're going to work in measuring your fats is through grams. So I know that 1 gram of fat is 9 calories. So I'm going to divide this total by 9. And that will tell me how many grams of fat I should consume in a day. So about 56 grams of fat is how many grams of fat that I'm going to consume a day. So to calculate our proteins, which again, this is a lot of math and I know it can seem really complicated, you can easily go on a website that does all of this work for you. Macrosinc.com has a free calculator and they do all of this work for you. So I would suggest that as an option, but if you want to adjust your macros as you go, this is the way to kind of have a good bound or a good basis to start with. So the next thing that we want to do is then take our weight, and I'm in America, so I'm working pounds. I'm 129 pounds, and I want to convert it into kilograms. And it's going to tell me that I am 58.513 kilograms. So now what is suggested is that we consume 1.2 to 1.8 grams of protein per kilogram. So we go back into our calculator. I'm going to put in my 58.513 kilograms, and I'm going to multiply that, and I'm going to go right in the middle again. Oh, not right in the middle, but somewhere in the middle. I'm going to do 1.4. And this tells me that I should be eating about 81.9182 grams of protein. I actually would prefer to go a little bit higher, so I'm actually going to erase that and go back. So I'm back in my calculator, and I'm going to go all the way up to the 1.8. So I'm going to multiply it by 1.8, and that's going to give me about 105 grams of protein. And that feels a little bit better, and I feel like my body composition is a little better when I have higher protein, even though I would say it's pretty hard to get that protein in through whole foods for me, because I'm not a lover of meat, I'm not a lover of vegetables, but we're going on this journey. So now as you work along with this, I would write everything down because it's hard to go back and forth. So I just have a bunch of different tabs open on my phone here. But I am now going to take 105 grams and multiply that by 4 because of the 4 calories of energy that protein provides. So times 4, and that equals 420 of the calories I can consume can be protein. And then we had said that 503 of my calories could be fats. So I'm going to add 420 plus 503, and that's going to give me 923 calories through protein and fats. So now what you do is you go back to your original calorie calculation that you came up with after your deficit. So I had 1685.11, and then I'm going to subtract my total calories of fat and protein. So that would be 923, and that's going to give me 762 calories that I can have of my carbohydrates. And as a reminder, carbohydrates give you about 4 calories of energy. So we're going to divide that total of 762.11 by 4 to determine that we can have 190 grams of carbs, or I can have 190 grams of carbs. Again, that seems a little bit high for me. I like a little bit higher protein, but you can adjust those macros as you see fit. But this is what we're going to start with. So if you're new to counting macros, the way that I would start is by focusing only on your calories. Now, calories, again, are a transfer of energies, right? So if you're only putting in, for me, a deficit of 5% of calories, I am going to have to burn more than what I'm consuming every day. And that will be my fat loss. It'll burn some of that fat off. So it's the law of thermodynamics. So energy cannot be created or destroyed. So if there is energy to be had, it's going to be used. And so if you're focusing on calories only to start for the first couple of weeks, you are going to see some fat loss happen if you are making sure that you're very specific on your counting and you are staying under calories. Now, why macros are so important, or counting macros, why that becomes super important, is not only are you now balancing your fats, your proteins, and your carbs, which you need for different types of energies. Carbs are really good for brain power. Your proteins are really good for hormone synthesis, muscle synthesis. My goal is to be building more muscle, so I want to make sure that I'm consuming the right amount of protein to build that muscle as I'm losing weight. So I will then focus on just my protein. So after I've spent a couple of weeks focusing on my calorie intake only, I then am going to focus on just getting enough proteins each day. And you'll find that that's a little bit of a challenge, and you're going to have to start kind of going back and forth with different foods and trying new foods, which is kind of the exciting part, to figure out how you can consume enough proteins in a day to be muscle building the same time that you're losing fat, which is what we want to do. We want to look toned. At least that's what I want to do. That's my goal here. That's what macros is really great for. After you've gotten really good with figuring out how to consume and keep your protein levels right where they're supposed to be, or as close as possible to where they're supposed to be in your macro counting, you then can start worrying about balancing your fats and your carbs. And baby steps is the way to do it. Little tiny baby steps. So you want to focus on doing little steps at a time. And through all of these steps, you're going to see, if you stick with keeping in that deficit, you're going to see fat loss. And then if you're working out and you're also focusing on protein, which is going to be that muscle synthesis, you're going to start seeing that toned look that you've been going for. So I hope that this helps. I have seen a huge difference in my body since I started macros. A huge thank you to Macros Inc. and my coach Amber, who was awesome and really helping me along the way in this journey. And if you are going to count macros and you are going to try this, or if you're going to do this along with me, please let me know. Let me know how it's going for you. Let me know if you have other questions. I'd love to help you along the way. And I hope that you have a good day. Bye.